Welcome back to the Misdiagnosed Podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Pyle, and we're back to finish the chapter on burnout. Learning about all those different deficiencies may have been an eye-opening experience for you if you hadn't yet connected the dots of supply and demand and over-demand and undersupply for your brain. I know for me, it was a lot of good reminders, especially with B12 and understanding that, yeah, you could have your B12 tested all day, but those tests only test what kind of B12 is in your bloodstream, not what's in your brain. There's just so much that medical science does not know. There's so much that our doctors do not know. And that's what my quest is to learn the things that they don't know, because I witnessed in my own life how them not knowing put me in dire straits. And yeah, last week I made an appointment to get my blood tested. It's on April 24th, which is 2 days before I leave for a 10-day cruise. And I have every reason to suspect that since I am off all medications and have changed my diet drastically since the last time I was tested. I was on three medications the last time. My oncologist wanted to put me on oral chemotherapy, but he had no idea that there was a virus on board that was an infection that was causing the platelet count. He just had no idea. So I said no. I said if the main risk is blood clots, and I already knew I was eating a primarily plant-based diet, whether or not it was healthy or not, because I had a lot of processed ingredients still, and I hadn't nixed gluten, and I was still eating dairy from time to time, that was affecting things. But I jumped on my trampoline, which is excellent for your lymphatic system. There were things I knew I was doing to keep my blood thin and my risk low for any type of blood clot that I was supposedly prone to get. I'm so grateful to myself for saying no to that, because, I mean, when a doctor says you need chemo, we're kind of brainwashed and indoctrinated to believe that it's a serious situation and that you really need it. But I think back to what he said, and he never said that it was chemo. He said you might read some scary things about it on the internet, but patients who have been on this treatment have seen results, right? And what are the results? Lowered platelet counts. That's all they're trying to do, is lower the symptom of an underlying problem that he didn't even know was there. I was told that it was a genetic malfunction, a genetic mutation called the JAK2 gene that had mutated and had suddenly caused my bone marrow to start creating more platelets than it needed. And reading over my records from the bone marrow biopsy that I had to go into the hospital for, this was an inpatient procedure. They had to drill into the back of my pelvis to get this bone marrow sample. None of it was really conclusive. So I'm not really sure. I think I'm going to read through the records again before I go into the doctor's office and ask him some questions. Like, this is not definitive at all, so how did you come up with this? But of course, I want to get my blood tested, and they do that in office, so I don't have to wait for any results or schedule a recheck or anything like that. I'll be able to see what my platelet levels are and everything else, like, right then. And I'm really optimistic about it. And I just came back from my kitchen. I was cleaning it up. I was making a big-ass mess, but I was juicing and cleaning up my kitchen. The construction is finally done. I would say it's 99% done. They still have to do some trim work, but I have an enclosed loft now with a door. The lengths I will go to keep the cats out of my upstairs area, where I have some furniture that I don't want them to destroy, some of which I need to get rid of, which makes me a little bit sad, but it is what it is. It's a process, and I'm not attached to anything, and the stuff that I feel I am attached to, I am letting go of and feeling free, Been spending some time decluttering and going through all the stuff and being real honest with myself about whether or not I'm really getting anything out of it. What's the point of having this? And chucking it, right? Because I think there's something to the idea that if we hold on to too much stuff that we're not using, it doesn't open us up to receiving what we truly desire for ourselves. It's like a spiritual congestion. Like, we have this scarcity or lack mindset that many of us were indoctrinated with when we grow up, that we have to hold on to what we've got. Hold on to what we've got. That's like really bad advice for a lot of reasons. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't take care of your things, but you should definitely value what brings you value and let things move on from you. Let things flow, right? Not just hold on to it. Let things flow, not force things to come to you. Let things flow, let things go. And we're not spending money, we're circulating money. Everything we send out comes back to us. So contemplating the idea of oneness and that we're all one and there's only one of us here and that you are just me living another life life and vice versa. And the same is true for everyone else. We're all on the same path that leads to the same place eventually, right? Some of us might really believe that some of us take more than one lifetime. We're here for a purpose, and everybody's purpose is different, but the same source, God, the Most High, like that exists as where we emanated from. We were made in that image, and so that's where we're all headed back to. It's impossible to not be a part of that energy. Kind of meditating on that, you can find some peace in letting things go, knowing that you're not giving it away, you're not throwing it away, especially if you're donating things, for free, or letting them go for like dirt cheap, which is probably what I'm about to do with a couch I have upstairs. Just let things go. You're making an investment in yourself by giving things away. Like all that counts on an energetic level. You're telling the universe like, okay, I'm making room, I'm making space for the new, out with the old and with the new. I think there's something really to that. And then in other news, in van news, I've been purchasing some items with my stockpile of Williams-Sonoma gift cards. And I was surprised this week because I also needed to buy a refrigerator for my van. And I finally found one that was the dimensions that I would need. I went on Wayfair of all places to buy it, and come to find out that I had like over $200 of credit from something I had returned in my account already. So that was kind of more of a demonstration of we receive money in expected and unexpected ways. We're always going to have what we need. Things just kind of show up. I've been repeating these, I guess, anti-scarcity, anti-lack mantras, affirmations, like I'm a money magnet and I'm surrounded by money. Opportunity always comes my way. Everything always works out for me. And it seems to be working, like in a wild way. All right, back to the topic at hand, which is burnout. We're just going to finish up the chapter. If you haven't listened to the part 1 of this episode, it's really good. Go back and listen to it. We go over 4 things that you're missing that can lead to burnout and therefore mental illness symptoms. Chronic dehydration, B12 deficiency, which a lot of people are deficient in, brain hormone deficiency, all connected to the liver and the adrenal glands. And then, of course, there's this trace mineral salt deficiency, things that your doctor won't tell you, right? All these things work together and they all help out your liver, which is your brain's best friend. And we've talked a lot on the show about emotional struggles, like relationship breakups, betrayal. And when we go through things like that, it hurts. Our heart hurts, but the same is true when we experience any event that's traumatizing in some way. To get us through it, a large spurt of resources is used up in our brains because there's an electrical storm that's happening because of that traumatizing event that we're up against. And so our brain undergoes the stress of these sorts of challenges, and neurotransmitters get dehydrated, and many even get eaten up or destroyed altogether. Neuropathway chemicals get overutilized, while chemical compounds, amino acids, and enzymes get burned up. Glucose, glycogen, electrolytes, and trace minerals, all these brain supplies, they basically get eaten up very quickly. And on top of all that, we don't know how to support our brain when we go through this trauma. And I am raising my hand to that because as I was going through the trauma of divorce and getting thrown into and left in the mental hospital by my former husband, not knowing what was going on, people thinking I was crazy and that they couldn't communicate with me and they were scared. Like, it was just a very traumatizing experience, being told that you have a disorder over and over again by different doctors and being told you can't leave unless you take medication. It just seemed like a Black Mirror episode. Like, everything felt like a Black Mirror episode for quite some time. And it took me a while to really realize just how traumatic that was. Yeah, and I certainly didn't know how to support my brain. I didn't know anything about that. I was just smoking more weed to like deal with the anxiety. And I wasn't working on restoring my brain's reserves because I wasn't even aware that my brain had reserves, right? So that happens to a lot of us. And what happens instead is we're unknowingly straining our brain further by starving it. Temporarily, of course, we're starving ourselves. We're binging on caffeine, chocolate, ice cream, pizza, chips, soda, Taco Bell, desserts. And I mean, that was my life. Those things prompt adrenaline surges. And I'm going to be real honest with you guys. I meant to put that in my little intro spiel before we got back into the serious topics. But I like to intersperse a little humor in the more serious things. Although it wasn't humorous when it was happening, Ironically, the last episode I recorded on Friday, I talked about Taco Bell, and it just so happened I let myself get too hungry this past Friday night, and I ordered like $36 of Taco Bell, and I ate so much Taco Bell for dinner. And I paid for it dearly, not just with money, but with brain fog and depression. And I think there was some aspect of it that was emotional, and that I was mad at myself for doing it and sabotaging myself in that way. But those types of habits are hard to break, and I'm grateful for the awareness. And I haven't done it yet, but I keep telling myself I need to write down what I went through. Like, I was overly emotional. Music was making me tear up, and I was feeling connected to my ex-boyfriend. It ended up with me telling him, my ex-boyfriend, over text, just how I felt, and not in like a romantic sense, but like things that I was too nervous to tell him when we were together because I wanted to save the relationship or whatever. But I was like, you know what? I owe it to myself to just tell him the things, and ended up just cutting him off altogether because his reaction reminded me of why we weren't together in the first place. And yeah, long story short, I was just very downtrodden. Like, I feel like I had a lot of burnout symptoms, and I swear I felt my liver that night. Like, my liver was protesting. It was just this tightness right above my small intestine, just like the upper GI area, just feeling and not good about myself. The brain fog was the worst. Going out with a friend on Saturday night, I told her, I'm like, my brain is just slow. I can just tell by how long it's taking me to come up with a sentence or like think of the words that I need to say, just not really feeling as present as I could be if I had the right fuel on board. And I made that choice, and I lived with it, and I lived to tell about it. And I'm here now to tell you the lessons learned about all of that. This part in the book reminded me about like food deliveries. I used to order that amount of Taco Bell at least once a week, and probably even more than what I ordered, and then just eat it for like 3 days straight, thinking it was semi-healthy because it was vegetarian, right? But knowing now what I know about how saturated in glyphosate those non-organic, cheapest possible tortillas soaked in glyphosate, like just stuff that I wasn't even aware of then. And sugar, the processed dairy, like non-real food, devoid of nutrients. And even I found out since then, like the wrappers have BPA in the wrappers, and that's why you're not supposed to microwave anything. I was microwaving the food in the wrappers because I was like, oh, it's just paper. But no, there's like dyes and other ingredients that are really not good for you in the wrappers of the food. Yeah. So do I have regrets? Yes, but I did find the silver lining in it, and I am that much more encouraged to stick with healthier stuff. And if I'm going to order in, let me order Indian food or something that I can at least reasonably assume is not microwaved. Yeah, it's higher quality, but so I can feel my liver, and our livers are actually meant to store bins, like just boxes and boxes, proverbial boxes of nutrients, like backup glucose reserves, backup mineral salts, backup electrolytes, phytochemical compounds, brain hormones, 4 times of crisis. So like going through a divorce, for example. When the brain runs through those supplies, then the liver is called upon to release a well of stored up nutrients into the bloodstream so the brain can have those instead. And here's the trouble with that. Most everyone has a stagnant and sluggish liver, and the backups are not there. Even if liver backups are there, precious brain resources still burn away more quickly than your liver can refill them when you're going through a breakup, a betrayal, or any other type of trauma. Even in the best of circumstances, brain reserves take time to build up again. So we don't want to slow down recovery even more by having maxed out or overly depleted livers. So part of getting our brain back is actually getting our liver back. I had to learn that the hard way. Like seriously, eating all that Taco Bell and all that Pizza Hut all the time, it was absolutely slowing down my liver, which wasn't able to create or release any hormones. And I read in the Liver Rescue book that the liver has over 2,000 different functions, and it's kind of seen as this very humble organ that doesn't have a lot to do, but it's really one of the most critical organs, and it works very, very closely with your brain. It's part of what is considered your gut too. Most people think, oh, it's just your intestines, right? Your gut. But like, no, your liver is so important. Part of our brain's strength is strengthening our liver, getting it out of that stagnant state and restoring the reserves in it. So every time we do have a crisis, which the ups and downs are going to come, our liver can exercise a quick response and replenish at least some of that loss that our brain experienced. we're walking around in perpetual deficit, people. I mean, humankind is in a deficit pretty much all the time. We're raised on foods that we're never supposed to eat to begin with. I mean, kid cuisine, mac and cheese, McDonald's, like how many of you guys grew up eating that sort of stuff? But we didn't know any better and our parents didn't either. So yeah, then we can get addicted to it. And then through adulthood, we're taught to eat foods that we were never supposed to eat either. Both childhood and adulthood, we're trained to turn to those comfort foods that are full of fat and then also stimulants like coffee and energy drinks that we were never meant to have. You know, comfort foods and stimulants, we end up relying upon those things when we are faced with burnout. I can remember when I first started drinking caffeine, how miraculous it felt. Like, oh my gosh, I haven't felt this good in years. And I always had a ton of energy. I never had to drink caffeine until I was probably 26, 27, maybe not until after I got back from South America. So 27, 28, something like that. I didn't realize what I was doing. I thought, oh, this is healthy. This is like a formula with all these, because they would pair it with adaptogens, right? Which is supposed to be good for your adrenal glands, but it's still full of caffeine. Yeah, so the first thing most of us do when we start feeling something's wrong, like I did, like maybe we feel brain fog or we have a hard time processing emotions, we feel fatigue behind our eyes. That was a big one for me too. Neurological fatigue, we hit the stimulants, right? I had myself convinced for at least a year there, probably in 2021, that I was ADHD, you know, because there's this whole cult on the internet. I call it a cult. I was like pulled into. Women are underdiagnosed, you know, like all these symptoms are actually ADHD and like we have them our whole lives. And I think they tend to get worse as we get older. And it's easy to think, oh yeah, I must have ADHD when you're prescribed Adderall or some other type of stimulant and you feel better. And you're like, oh, I'm normal. Like I've been battling the temptation, especially since like the Taco Bell incident. We'll just refer to it as that. The Taco Bell incident where I was like, oh, I really want to get more stuff done, but I don't really feel like it. Like Adderall makes me feel like doing the things I don't want to do. That's the only reason I still have it, for like emergent situations. Like one time I think the last time I took it, my living room had flooded. And I say that, you know, somewhat over dramatically, but there was some malfunction in the roof and it's been fixed, but there was like water all in my living room and I was like, I'm going to have to clean everything, like move the rug. Like it was a major thing. And I was like, I need to enjoy this. And so I would take a very small dose of Adderall. But yeah, like that's what I would do, is hit the stimulants. And so you feel, when that happens, you feel an adrenaline high and you've got an electrical fire in your brain at max. Whether that's from the stimulant, like a psychoactive drug, caffeine is a psychoactive drug, or from drama that's occurring in your life. We also reach out to high-fat comfort food that we were never supposed to consume ever. I'm down on Taco Bell a lot, but it's not just Taco Bell. You know, it's all different types of fast food. It's processed food in general, like most of the grocery store. The fact of the matter is they're not supportive of burnout or what's behind burnout in the first place. They're not innocent at all. They're unproductive for anybody dealing with burnout because they hinder both the liver and the brain, but they're the foods that we're taught to reach out for to soothe ourselves. It's like a habit. And so I recognize that, like me being hungry and not even thinking about the daily harvest meals I have in my freezer, have a little higher fat content, but are still pretty delicious. I've got a bunch of their flatbreads that are amazing, and I don't get paid to say that. I just really like their flatbreads. I didn't even think about those because like the word Taco Bell came into my mind and I started thinking about like how good it would taste, and then I was just like, I'm so hungry. I was drinking a green smoothie while that happened too, ironically, and so I just ordered it. So it wasn't supportive at all to the situation that I was dealing with, which just, you know, I needed to get some nutrients into my body and not just food, right? That food hardly had any nutrients at all. And we kind of teach ourselves and like get into the habit of reaching for those types of food to soothe ourselves, to numb out or power through. And I think I was just kind of bored on Friday night. It was just like reverting to old habits instead of being aware of what I was doing. And last night I had a much better night. I decided to pick up a book instead of turn on the TV or watch TikTok videos. It's like I learn stuff. I like follow a lot of accounts where you learn a lot of stuff about history, and I like to learn how to clean. Like I'm currently stripping some laundry for the first time because I saw on TikTok how easy it is to do. Just throw everything in the washer or the bathtub and put in some borax washing soda and some powdered detergent, which I just happen to have, and strip all my workout clothes. And I mean, the water is not as dirty as some of the water I've seen on TikTok, but when I worked out this morning, I noticed like just doing a squat with pants that I thought were clean, I had come through the washing washing machine, several times. I'm like, I can smell my crotch. Like, pardon my French, but I mean, it's not really a French word. But I was like, these are clean pants. Like, I just showered. I wasn't like, it wasn't me. It was the pants that were smelling. And yeah, so this is like a life-changing thing, because now you can go on like an online thrift store or find items at thrift stores, and you can make them super clean after you buy them. And this has been life-changing, so I'm excited about it. Anyway, back to the liver. It's meant to be our library of nutrients. It's a library of phytochemical compounds, antiviral and antibacterial compounds, trace minerals, macrominerals, enzymes, hormones, glucose, and so much more. But because of the way we eat most of the time, when our liver gets stagnant and sluggish because of a high-fat diet, whether it's good or bad quality fats, our liver loses the ability to catalog, convert, process, and methylate. Have you heard maybe that's a buzz term that's used a lot, is like methylation, the critical nutrients our brains need. So that means a high-fat diet is one of the bases of our deficiencies. And we're obsessing over getting our omegas. We're actually depleting ourselves of every other nutrient, which creates an acidic environment that atrophies the brain and draws critical trace minerals and phytochemical compounds out of our brain and even out of our skull. So we got to be clear that nobody is deficient in omega fatty acids. There's omegas from fish, cheese, nuts, seeds, nut butters, seed butters, avocados, and oil. They don't make up for what you lose when you put them front and center in your diet. Yeah, like people are just obsessed with eating nothing but fat these days, or like just really high fat in general. That's why I stopped some of the meal prep or pre-made meals like Sakara. I really like Sakara. Food is delicious, but everything is so high in fat. It's just, they just add fat for the fun of it because they're like, oh, it's healthy fat. It's so good for you. And no, like it's not actually, not at that amount. Like you don't need that much fat at every meal. Anyway, end rant. Yeah, so we're essentially losing our reserves to fight or flight. So even when critical building blocks do reach the brain and storage is refilled, meaning that the brain has readily available assets like nutrients, phytochemical compounds, there's still fight or flight to consider. And whenever we're in fight or flight, there's a bunch of adrenaline, which has a significant effect on those stores of brain supplies, as I learned firsthand. Because we get these floods of adrenaline that can scorch our brain tissue, and it's our reserves of nutrients and phytochemical compounds that help protect us and minimize damage from the excess adrenaline's corrosive nature. It's essentially like battery acid. It's hard to keep your storage bins full of the good stuff inside the brain when on top of using your brain's reserves for daily thinking, emotions, talking, playing, doing tasks, taking care of our stuff, living our lives, and trying to create our dreams, we're also drawing on these precious reserves to do battle in moments of fight or flight. Hard times of struggle, difficulty, challenge, whenever these occur, our adrenal glands release spurts of adrenaline, which I learned is also called epinephrine, that go to the brain really fast. Adrenaline is there to burn fast, and it interacts with the electricity in the brain like gasoline to a flame. But it's our brain's fire that keeps us alive. It helps us navigate the difficult moments. It helps us make decisions quickly. It helps us defend ourselves. But if we're consistently putting ourselves in compromising positions and that goes on for too long, all the supplies that are coming into the brain are being used up before they can even become reserves. What's coming in is not getting in fast enough to make up for what's going out and being lost. It's okay to come up against fight or flight because life is hard. We're up against a lot, and it's okay as long as we know how to restore and replenish our brain's reserves. We tend to do the opposite though, because when life is relatively smooth and we have more time in our hands, we don't tend to use that time to build up our reserves. We can latch onto vices like caffeine addictions, intermittent fasting, extreme heat activities like hot yoga or excessively long hot saunas, extreme body cooling treatment, alcohol, antidepressants. We indulge in foods and activities that are not always helpful or supportive for our brains. Caffeine alone, any beverage with caffeine in it, is very destructive to the brain's reserves because it puts us in a false state of crisis. And interestingly enough, we're not at that chapter yet, but cannabis also puts our brain in a false state of crisis. It creates fight or flight. And if you drink caffeine on a daily basis, you're in that false state of crisis every day, even if everything's actually fine. And it slowly robs our brain's nutritional reserves in process. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people in the world that are just desperate to get their health back. But if someone takes a normal natural health direction, which often relies on elementary measures like removing processed foods, they can all too easily run into the traps of the trend traps, as Anthony calls them. They're stuck in a world where their health results only get them so far. And so they're forced to test out trendy theory after trendy theory and essentially become guinea pigs for these hypotheses that are totally misguided. And when that's the case, it's going to be a long time before the brain ever gets restored, if it ever does at all. So as we've been learning throughout this episode and last episode, burnout in the brain is really complicated. There's many people that are dealing with health issues and they have viral inflammation, neurological fatigue, deposits of toxic heavy metals, other poisons, solvents, air fresheners, fragrances, scented candles, perfumes, colognes, fabric softeners, scented detergents, clothing chemicals, and MSG inside brain tissue, not to mention long-term caffeine addictions and alcohol dependencies. I've been there too. So when someone experiences burnout for too long, it can get some depression with it. They can get some anxiety with it. I think that's exactly what happened to me. They can get some depersonalization or brain fog. And that's especially true if you are experiencing underlying factors like toxic heavy metals in the brain, which everybody has those, but the levels are all different. What combinations you have and where they are in the brain, they're all different. And that's what determines the kind of added bonus that someone's going to have with their burnout. So depression with a side of anxiety, for example. And then there's viral brain inflammation. A person that might have a small amount of viral brain inflammation is going to burn out faster than the person without viral brain inflammation. Burnout's hard enough for someone without viral brain inflammation. That's exactly what I was experiencing with the Epstein-Barr virus, and the Mycoplasma pneumonia cofactor bacteria was brain inflammation. And it took the Amen Clinic to tell me that it was brain inflammation, but it took medical medium to help me figure out what to do about it, because it wasn't going to be, the first course of action this doctor at Amen Clinics put me on was antibiotics and a week of ivermectin, which is antiviral. And I took the blood test 3 months later and I still had really high numbers. Not as high as before, but still really high. So what I was doing was not working. And it's not just EBV. You also could have shingles, any of the herpes viruses, HHV 6, 7, cytomegalovirus is going to be even more susceptible to brain burnout, any of those things, because patches of brain tissue are slightly inflamed from the neurotoxins that come from the virus, and that puts a damper and stress upon neurons, your neurotransmitter chemicals, cranial nerves, and brain endocrine glands. Depending on where in the brain the inflammation is more dominant, symptoms and conditions will vary, and it can affect the type of burnout you're experiencing. So when someone's brain is inflamed as a result of a viral infection, more supplies are needed than for someone who doesn't have viral neurotoxins inflaming their brain, because neurotoxins swell the neurons. A swelling neuron demands more supplies because the neuron is in a constant process of trying to repair itself. Someone with viral inflammation in the brain needs twice the glucose as someone who doesn't. If someone with viral brain inflammation is not advised properly about diet, what they're eating, it makes it even more difficult. So if you're told to eat a high-fat diet, this is actually going to minimize the oxygen getting to your brain. And oxygen is helpful both in repelling viral infection and in restoring brain tissue and creating new brain cells. A high-fat diet also inhibits glucose from getting into brain cells. Just because someone is dealing with viral inflammation and toxic heavy metals in the brain, that doesn't mean we can't reverse the brain burnout. We can still reverse brain burnout. At the same time, we're going to be heading in the direction of reversing viral inflammation and reducing toxic heavy metals, which is like literally everything I've been doing for the last almost year at varying degrees of intensity. What's important to keep in mind is that someone dealing with extra complications are going to need more time to do it and more help along the way. We tend to think that managing our thoughts is the answer to burnout. I think I went through a lot of therapy and different modalities where you just have to heal your inner child, it's all like mentality based, and nobody could tell me what was actually going on. Controlling our brain waves, our neurological pathways with positive thoughts and meditation, all that stuff, people believe is a key to solving burnout. And it can totally be helpful, but if there's pieces missing in our brain's physical function, it's harder to succeed in those things, whether it's meditation or just creatively thinking, having positive thoughts, thoughts, happy thoughts, and achieving, even setting goals and dreams. Many people who are burnt out and confused about why, who haven't found a way to fix their burnout or other symptoms yet, they look towards these mental practices with a lot of hope. And they want to rid themselves of all their physical and mental discomfort. But mental practices only get us so far by themselves. Lasting relief is always going to come from addressing supply and demand deficiencies in the brain and the factors that are draining our brains faster than we can replenish them. So the root causes, the critical root causes of the physical burnout problem have to be fixed. Our neurotransmitters are weak and dehydrated. Our neurons are atrophied, our electrical impulses are diminishing, our brains are bathing in acids, and our glucose reserves are disappearing, which all makes the struggle of trying to balance the mind through self-care, love, positive thinking, creative thoughts, and realignment of our thought patterns, learning how to minimize our triggers, all the things that you could learn in therapy, all that becomes a lot more difficult because there's always a physical component behind our struggles, always. So the best meditations we'll ever experience occur inside a brain that has ample electrolytes. It has enough mineral salts. It has enough glucose, B12, neurotransmitter conductivity, neuron size and strength is up to par, and electrical impulse fire isn't too hot. And there's fewer toxic heavy metals, fragrances, MSG, caffeine, and alcohol. Those are when you're going to experience your best meditations ever. Then you can rewire thought patterns and triggers and rewiring for a more present moment existence. You can do that when your brain has proper supplies and all that stuff will stick. Someone who has brain burnout and that's missing these key pieces of the health puzzle will find that it's hard to correct an unhealthy thought pattern because it doesn't take hold in them. It doesn't stick. So people with different signs of burnout have a much more difficult time meditating, focusing, or even believing in themselves. I can totally attest to that. I mean, even over the weekend, I was feeling like down on myself, and I know that my brain just did not have what it needed. I was giving it garbage instead, and I'm still in that healing process. Feeling way better today, by the way. Like everything has kind of gotten out of my system. Yeah. So that's right. Key trace minerals in the brain are going to help us support ourselves, believe in ourselves. As we learned on the episodes about the emotional brain, a strong physical brain will help defend us from emotional injury, and a strong brain helps defend us from emotional triggers. When someone's cranky or tired, really irritable, not feeling at their best because they're exhausted and really struggling, and when you trigger them, maybe it's going to affect the person. Like, it's a lot worse. It's much easier for that person to navigate a trigger like that if they're feeling more themselves and they're not tired or irritable and they feel vital and are thinking clearly because their brain has what it needs and they're not addicted to adrenaline, caffeine, or any other vice. When someone's able to process thoughts well and a trigger comes along, there's a good chance that it's going to blow right over them and they'll just say, no worries, I get it. Brain burnout can bring something out of us that is not us. It can make us unrecognizable. You're not even who you are at all. Brain burnout can bring us to our knees, make us doubt who we are, make us doubt if we're a good person or not, make us doubt what we're doing and where we're going in our life, doubt our purpose, even doubt our existence. This doesn't make us weak. We didn't manifest it through our thoughts. It's physical. Patterns can take over with brain burnout where we get heated up too quickly. We can become hot-headed, have tantrums, fall apart, experience meltdowns, or even increased OCD flare-ups. And a lot of those symptoms sound like what gets commonly diagnosed as bipolar disorder. It's because our brain engine burns hot so quickly, it doesn't take much to spark a fire. Information coming in from any outside source processes and registers differently when our brains are in a weakened condition and its reserves are low. It doesn't take a lot to rev that fire up really fast. Our reactions could be intense, even if we're not physically showing a reaction because that's not who you are. Internally, there's still a reaction happening inside the brain. There's still a smoldering fire that's taking hold. And when this occurs over and over again, when everything seems to be in your way, it develops into a pattern, and it's a pattern caused by burnout, a deficiency of brain supplies, and it's not a pattern caused by you. Someone could say boo and you jump, your brain jumps. The pattern can turn into an overheating and reserves burn away quickly. You might erupt into a fit of rage and end up in the hospital and get told you have bipolar. It's just the way it works. And all the while, your brain just does not have what it needs to function properly. But as we're learning, we are designed to heal our brains and keep them strong. Our brains are designed to restore brain supplies faster than it uses them up. And it's designed to remove the biohazards that aren't supposed to be in there. That's key to preventing and addressing the deficiencies and all that burnout that we've been talking about. And truly, the tools and resources I've found in the medical medium books are the most effective that I've ever experienced. And I've certainly found relief, and I've seen my true self be restored from a place where I just never thought it was possible. I thought I would always have to be on Xanax. I didn't think I would ever get to the root cause of the issues that I had, and that I would have to live with these illnesses, right? Because they tell us that there's no cure, that these illnesses that we experience are lifelong, and that there's nothing that can be done about them. But look at who's behind those claims. It's people who have a lot of money to make on our illness, our chronic illness, whether it's mental or physical, or as we've learned, mental illness is physical illness. There's a major physical component, and it's not genetic. It's something that we can do something about. But if that were mainstream news and people were unindoctrinated about their own ability to heal themselves, then a bunch of industries, including the largest, big pharma industry of psychiatry, I mean, they would just be out of a job, and that would suck for them. So the industry itself is not going to change. It's us who has to change. It's us who has to wake up and make changes in our own lives, in our own personal economy, so to speak, and realize what power we have to regenerate ourselves and to make different choices, to fuel ourselves better, to omit things in our diet and environment that are very well harming us, like the excessive Taco Bell, like the caffeine, like the cleaning products we use, anything that could be disrupting our hormones, feeding viruses, those types of things. It's critical to get a handle on what's really in your environment and take control over it, because you're the boss. You're the boss, and we are creating our own lives by the choices that we make, and we get to choose who we want to be. So if you choose to be mentally ill, you can choose to be mentally ill. I mean, that's your choice. But if you choose to not identify with being mentally ill for life, like I have, and you choose to do something about it, don't be surprised if your symptoms start to go away, just like mine did. It's a life-changing experience to know just how much power you have. So with that, we'll wrap up this episode. That was the end of the chapter, actually. Your burnt out, deficient brain. And in the next episode, we're going to get started talking about addiction. It's super interesting. I'm really pumped to get into it as someone formerly addicted to various things, learning about that and sharing it with you guys. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.